I think one of the most common struggles for artists is to get better at selling. And I think that is where most artists get stuck. What is your advice for them?
Make the decision once that you're going to live your best life and you're going to follow your dreams and pursue your passions at whatever cost. You're just going to do it. Most of what they teach you in art school is not that usable. And so it's this very distilled version of learning how to draw and paint. Yeah, my motto in life is do work that's no longer work, so you never have to work again. So to me, painting isn't work, and building the school and building the business, going to meetings, doing it isn't work. I love it. We live in a time of tremendous opportunity, and people who are sort of on the edge with their eyes open, looking, reading, are going to, go the farthest.
Welcome to the podcast, Ellie.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm great. And thank you for having me.
More than happy to have you. I think it's so incredible because I've loved a lot of things that I've seen on Instagram, the reels. I think that's also because the things you say are come from your own experience, are very honest, and I think that is why people connect with it. But before we go into that conversations, how about you introduce yourself in your words and who you are and what you do to anyone who's listening?
Yeah, sure. So I live in the United States in Florida. I have 4 children. I have 3 daughters and 1 son. They're all grown. So my youngest is 18 years old, and my
You look
oldest
like
is
18
20.
yourself.
Oh, thank you. uh, it's the beauty lights, but So, and my oldest is 24. My husband, John, we've been married since 1995. And and he is also an artist. So we're both artists and completely unemployable. We haven't had jobs since 1996. And we got our start early, right out of college, and just went right into art in the art field. We both worked for other companies first, for a very short time before we went out on our own, freelance. And we sold our art in all kinds of different markets. We started out in the decorative market. So that means that we created art that would beautify a space. And so the goal of the art wasn't so much what the story is behind the art or the artist, but just purely based on aesthetic and
Aesthetics.
what's trending in decor. And so it was really interesting. I learned very quickly what people were looking for, what type of art sells, how to identify colors that people, want to live with, versus colors they don't want to live with, themes that people identify with. And so it was a huge learning experience. And then we began working with galleries directly and kind of moved into the more collectible market. My husband and I started collaborating, where we paint on the same piece together. And as our kids were growing up, they were all doing art. And we opened the school in 2010. And with the intent of helping other artists make a living selling their art, because we had so many artist friends over the years ask us, how we did it. And we would help them individually when we could, but we didn't have a platform or a way, like you say, to build community, and some sort of structure for that. So that's what we started in 2010 with Milan Art Institute. And so so that's where I'm still a professional artist, still paint all the time. All my children are artists and sell their artwork.
I love that. This is so wonderful. I have so many questions, and I know I also read about you, and I was just reading that you didn't come from, and I this is a point that I really resonated, and also because we were just speaking about India, and you working with someone who has, so you understand the cultural context. I also understand you're Greek, and you have a Greek father, and then when you moved in here, it wasn't as easy for you either. Can you talk about this process and this experience of yours?
Yeah, so my dad he left Greece in the 60s. So when he was 18. And so his mindset hasn't changed. Now if you go to Greece, it's progressive and people think differently.
He's in Greece right now, or has he also moved to the
No,
US?
no, he immigrated to the United States for college, and he's lived there ever since. But his mindset is still 1960s Greece, and so I grew up that boys were better than girls, and yeah, and so my mom raised me with this idea of anything you want to be, you can be.
Love
But my
that.
dad was grooming me to marry a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, and be taken care of. And I would be this little princess in a chandelier palace, raising children and cooking for my husband, and a very traditional idea. And so when I wanted to paint and be an artist, that was okay because I could play with my colors while my husband worked.
It wouldn't even looked as like a profession. It was also something like, with India. I also grew up with this whole idea. Okay, girls sew, paint, and decorate, and boys make money and they're athletic, and like it was like a cultural part that you could be creative, but because also that you didn't have to make your livelihood out of it. You didn't have to pay the bills, and it was something to keep you busy.
Yeah. So he was very supportive. I mean, he bought me all kinds of materials. He complimented what I did. He super supportive. When I wanted to go to art school, that's when he started to, because he was saying, well, what kind of man will you meet in art school? And I said, well, I mean, I don't know. I want to go to art school. And so he didn't like that because he was afraid I would marry an artist.
Artist.
Um, but I got a yeah, but I got a scholarship, and he also liked to brag to his friends that his daughter got a scholarship. So yeah, so that's how I was able to go to art school. And then I was John was my boyfriend in high school, my last year of high school. So he went to art school with me, and my dad did not like John at all. And so he discouraged that relationship for years and years. And so he kept trying to get me to transfer to University of Georgia out of the art school, because
He was afraid something would happen and get it too serious.
yeah, and he wanted me to meet a different man in university that fit his template. So I did transfer to University of Georgia, and then once John and I were engaged, he gave up on John. He gave up on that and fighting the marriage. So he pushed me to be a teacher, and he said, go to college one more year and get a teaching degree, so you at least will live.
Yeah. Oh, because also I think, this idea, very commonly, and if you, to be very honest, even in today's time here in India, that would stay there, is true. Like, I think artists had this image of being like a hippie and like unreliable, non-serious, and all of that, and also financially, the most, it could still be taken for a woman, still could be taken for a woman, because as society, a woman is not expected, even if you're working, it's not expected out of them to bear the entire burden of the family and race, versus patriarchally there is so much of financial expectation on men, and the idea that a man can fulfill that with with the job of being an artist or a creative is, in their perception, very low.
Yeah. Yeah, it and it might be stronger in India and more traditional cultures, but it's like that even in the United States today. So I don't know. Well, anyway, so I was in I was in my last year at university, and my dad wanted me to go one more year to get this certificate. And so I went to the education class. No, well, I signed up for it, and I went to the first class, and the teacher, in the first day, he said, if you are taking this education course and going into education because it's your fallback career and it's not your true passion, he said, leave the class. If you're here and you have strong political or religious views, go, leave. This isn't for you. He said, if you're here because you want your summers off to do what you really want to do, that's it. Leave. And I was like, check, 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 check. Okay. Yeah, and so I left, and I called my dad and I said, I can't be a teacher. They'll fire me. I can't be a teacher. Uh, so so yeah, I just graduated with a BFA, and I started my career, and both of us, have earned a living off of our art. So he really didn't have much he could say. Plus, at that point, I was financially independent, and I was sort of in a mode of like, I'm going to do what I want. It's my life. So he got over it. Now he's proud of us. Oh yeah, we got married, and yeah.
Okay, so that's how your before you know marriage, and you're finding your way to the arts. Let's talk a little bit about the first half of this conversation, is you figuring out your own life as an artist, as a couple, as an artist, having a husband as an artist, the trajectory. How was it in the beginning when you had just started and that you even got married? How was it, two people, creative people, in a time like that? um, I'm sure it wasn't as common. It wasn't as easy. Social media still wasn't there. It still made it a little bit more approachable. How did you start it off? What were your beginning years look like?
Well, we both worked for other companies. So we commuted to Atlanta. We lived outside of the city, and it was 76 miles one way. So it took us, with traffic, sometimes 2.5 hours to get to work. And so we would drive, and our relationship at this point wasn't so strong. And my dad's words would haunt me all the time of, I'm marrying a loser. I'll have to take care of him my whole life. He's not man enough for me. All these things, and so John was working, making a little less money than I was, and he was working at one company as an assistant to an artist. He was an artist assistant, and then I worked at another company where I had my own studio, and I just painted in the decor market for them. And they would bring me canvases every week, and I had to
Wow.
paint.
I think that was a brilliant starting job.
Yeah, really, because I mean, all my friends from art school was like, "Oh, you've sold your soul. It's terrible," you know.
But also, I think, just as an artist perspective, a lot of people have to do so many other jobs,
Yeah,
that do
that's what my
not.
friends were doing.
Yeah,
Right.
and at least it has contributed you to making your artistic work
Absolutely.
so much more better
And
and stronger.
it was like getting paid to go to school, because I I had to build this discipline, and first of all, wake up super early in the morning, do this drive, and then get to work. And I think I started at 8, and paint until 5 o'clock. And the first week, I was like, uh, I couldn't paint that long. I've never painted from 8 to 5 so many hours. I'd paint 3 hours at a time, take a break, and so it was a shock to my system. But after a few weeks, I built up all of the stamina to paint 40 hours a week. So I had no choice but to paint 40 hours a week.
But did it also become overwhelming? in a process, like when you have to, like when you are doing it at your own pace as a as an independent artist, it's like, when you feel you are in the rhythm and then you go in the flow state, and it but when you have to do, there's no if and but.
Well, you're right. It literally forced me to come out of this sort of hobbyist artist mentality to a professional mentality where you have to show up and work whether you feel like it or not. You have to paint and find creativity whether it's there or not. You just have to paint. And so that's I think in the first couple weeks to a month it was a shock to my system, and I had to adjust to that mentality. But after it became a habit and it became something I did every day, then it was easy. And then I found my creativity and my desire to paint just grew and grew and grew, and there wasn't any resistance anymore. So it was a good job, and I pretty much could paint whatever I want within these boundaries, and and then they were selling them. And so after a year of kind of observing, I was like, well, all I have to do is find the person who's selling these, and, work for them directly. And I can be at home in a home studio.
Yeah, and be your own boss.
Yeah. And be my own boss and not have to do that commute anymore.
Yeah.
So I told John that's what I was going to do.
By the time that you figured that, did you feel safe enough that you can find, like, making the artwork is one part of our jobs. The other part of the job, if you're independent, is if you want to sell them, being on the other end.
Well, I got lucky here. So I had a friend who was in the office of this company, and uh, I was kind of on lunch breaks. We would talk, and I was telling her, oh, I can't take this commute anymore. I just can't do that drive. It's I'm wasting 5 hours of my life every day. And she says, I know the salesman that works for us part time. Like, he was an independent salesman, so he sold their artwork, but plus a lot of other artwork. And he said, go talk to him. Maybe he'll sell your artwork for you. And I was like, that's the answer. So I got his number and I contacted him, and he agreed to meet for coffee. So we meet for coffee, and I showed him all the work I had done that year. And he said, as soon as you get me 100 paintings, I'll help you. I'll sell your artwork. And I thought,
100
okay,
paintings.
100 paintings.
But
And
for
so I
you at
thought,
that
okay,
point, wasn't that hard a deal because you were already painting 40 hours?
yeah, I was like, okay, I can do that in 1 month. So I made a power statement that I'm going to be free from my job. I'm going to own my own art business. I'm painting 100 paintings this month. They'll be complete. And I taped it to my steering wheel because I had this long commute, and I just would recite it and say it out loud. And so I lived in this reality that I had to paint 100 paintings no matter what. And I broke it up, and I thought, okay, if I paint 25 paintings a week, I'll have 100 paintings in a month.
But
And
did you
then
leave your
I'll
job
give them
by
to the
then?
guy.
Were you
No,
doing this
no, I stayed
along
in.
with your job?
Yeah. So
God.
when I got home from work at about 7 at night, then I would paint until about midnight and then sleep till about 6, and then go
Then
to
go back.
work
Yeah.
and then go back. And then on the weekends, it's all I did. And so I made sure my goal was just 25 paintings, 25 paintings. I had to do 25 paintings that week. Before my head hit the pillow Sunday night, 25 paintings had to be finished. And I
Yeah.
just did it like a production line where I would work on, like 8 or 10 landscapes at one time, and then, 8 or 10 abstracts or whatever. And so that I did it, and at the end of the month, I had 100 paintings, and I met the guy, and I gave my notice at work
Yeah.
that I was quitting, and I showed him the paintings, and he said he was surprised that I did it, and so he said that to me to scare me away, so he wouldn't
Oh.
have to deal with me. So
And here you were with 100 paintings.
yeah, and from that moment forward, I always made more money than I had at my job.
Wow.
So the next year, John did it. He left his job and he kind of worked into my network that I had been building. And by then I worked with another dealer. So I had two people. I had a dealer and the salesperson. And between the two of them, I was always busy and selling enough. And then John was able to do it.
I'm sure even like, making 100 paintings in itself, in that process, it technically, I think you had those 40 hours that you were already painting, so that must have taught you already a lot. But then also managing, I think, the project management of, understanding, okay, how do I manage this 100 painting project? How do I maintain deadlines, requirements of material, costing? Now you are the boss, you get to decide how are you going to price, and for that you'll have to account how you're buying, what is like, there's so many things that you learn even in a tiny project if you're doing all by yourself. Like, the learning curve is huge. So what were revelations for you in this 100 days when you were doing it by yourself and like figuring out what was the toughest one for you?
I mean, probably space because, when you're working on 25 pieces, um, yeah. So I worked in my garage and there was a lot of stuff in there that wasn't art related, shovels and whatever. And so organizing the space when I didn't prepare to organize the space, I had paintings everywhere. And then they were coming in the house and they were on all the tables and they were taped to walls. And, because I used either paper or rolled canvas. The guy didn't want stretched canvas because he would roll things up in his car and drive
And you
and
were
take
doing
them.
oil paintings?
Yeah, it was mixed media. It was mixed media. Most of it was acrylic at that time. Um, yeah.
Because otherwise,
So
oil painting in itself would have been like a mammoth of a task. Because it logistically also it requires a
for
lot more like,
drying, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. But on the paper, you would have to tape them off, put like newspaper around the edges so it stayed clean. And John did help me with that. He would help me like tape and peel the tape and those types of things. And but I think as far as like production, I really learned that at my job because they would they would bring me canvases and they were always in like pairs or in groups of four. And so I knew how to work production style. I knew how to, line up a bunch of artwork and okay, collage, 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 collage. Okay, washes, 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 washes. And you would work on them all at once. And the only time you'd work on something one at a time is at the end. When you're doing the last touches. So, well, that's it. So I just think a lot of things that I was doing at work translated into what I was doing on my own. I just scaled it. I just did more.
But tell me something, in this process, a lot of your experience and acumens that you've learned over the job and this experiment was also still related to the artistic or the creative side of the business. Let's say, as an artist, I believe like we are all independent businesses as an artist as well. But venturing out on your own also meant that you had to include the business acumen, the administrative, like figuring out your sales and all, and like even making sure if this is viable. Because sometimes what we also do is we think, okay, we're making more money, but we're also probably spending more money. And a lot of times people forget to account that it's not only the incoming, but also the outgoing that they need to account for and see, okay, how far is this going to take me, and all of those, the business part of the world. How were you on that, and then how did you figure your way out?
I was terrible at that, and I've always been terrible at that. I'm still terrible at that. So other people do that, but I, I just muddled through. I just powered through all of it, and I things were a mess, and I didn't. How I knew if I could afford something is there was money in the bank. So I didn't have an accounting process. I didn't get the proper licenses. I didn't do any of those sort of hard business things. When it came to tax time, I did my own taxes, and it would be like 2 weeks of hell for me, and trying to learn and asking anybody I could ask to help. And So, in the United States, you have to fill out, if you own your own business, the Schedule C thing, and and I would just throw all my receipts, because my mom would tell me, "Oh, save all your receipts because you can deduct those." So I would just throw them in a box, and then at the end of the year, I had all these receipts, and I would try to. So I wasn't very good at the sort of those types of administrative type business things. But I did have a knack for creative side of business. And I would say what I really believe strongly in, I read a lot of books at the time. And I mean, I still read a lot of books, but I realized I had a shortcoming when it came to um, thinking bigger, um, relationships, how to, because I was very shy and I couldn't talk to people. I was very insecure and very shy, and I knew I had to grow. So I read a lot of books that helped me have a proper mindset, and I knew I had to change my thinking in order to succeed. So I concentrated on those types of business attributes and growing in that way. So on the administrative side, I was a mess, but I was growing quickly in, like, in having the proper mindset and outlook, as a business person, being able to think like a business person.
Yeah, thinking bigger, having bigger dreams, having bigger goals, and also I think what is possible for us. I think
Time
unless
management. Yeah, time management, just principles of success, like, deliver more than you promise, always be on time, just those things that are counterintuitive to how we're raised to think that artists behave. Artists are flaky, artists aren't reliable, they don't do what they say.
changing that narrative.
Yeah, changing that narrative. So I read a lot of success books, and just uh, you know, even just how you dress when you go out, even if you're going to the grocery store, you never know who you'll meet, just things like that. And when you incorporate those habits, those professional habits into your daily life, it really does change how you think about yourself. It changes how you think about your work, and the possibilities and where it could go. And then I think doors open to you and new opportunities and new relationships. So
I love that. And what was happening with John at that point while you were doing all of this?
well, he at that point was, that's kind of when our relationship began to turn a little bit better, was when we went out on our own, and he started reading the success books too, and so he started to develop better habits, and get a little bit more diligent about things, because John was that typical artist profile.
Oh,
Yeah, and he had at the time sort of this victim mindset of, like, and that was the biggest issue in our relationship up to that point. Because meanwhile, my dad's words are going through my mind, and I'm thinking, what did I get myself into? He is all those things my dad said, and John was sort of behaving that way. And then I would say those things to him, and I would say harmful words, and because I would see this reality, and so then I would just say what I was seeing. But what I learned from these success books is you say what you want to happen, not what is happening. And so I started to change my dialogue with John, and instead of saying things like, you're just a big loser sitting on the couch doing nothing, or whatever, I would say, "Oh, John, I'm so proud of you. You're really going far in life, and you're doing great." And so, I mean, that's kind of an extreme example, but
yeah. Encouraging and pushing someone to move towards that point where you want them to, want to see them.
yeah, and then he started getting more curious about my growth and what I was doing. So he started to grow as well, and things really changed at that point.
Okay, if feel free if you don't want to answer. When in a specific, I think in a typical situation like this, when your spouse is not a partner, and I think irrespective of being an artist or not, a very common denominator, specifically in patriarchal, like in a more traditional, way people are brought up, is if the if if the man is doing better than the woman, that's acceptable. It does not hurt a woman's ego. It does not hurt the society's ego as well. Versus when a woman is doing better than a man, even for whatever time you are in, they're not being man enough. They're not owning up to their responsibilities or hurting their egos. And I'm just even trying to understand this in the perspective of you were not just people, two spouses in different professions. I think even as artists, like people from art, like people as artists, where as is finding your way is hard. And then you find, like, you're working as spouse and you figure out that your spouse is being able to do that and doing better. Did that bring any kind of friction, or did you experience any hurdles with that?
Yeah, it's actually been a huge theme in our marriage and our life. Now, John was raised very different. He was raised with no dad, and his mom was extremely um, uh, at the forefront of the women's movement, and she even
Wow.
knew Gloria Steinem. So
Wow.
she raised him to not have those mindsets at all. And
Because
he cooked.
traditionally that
He
would be a very normal reaction.
Yeah, yeah. So he cooked, he did dishes. I mean, he was not falling into any of these templates. And so when we come together, he's sort of naturally a supporter. He's naturally nurturing. He's naturally behind somebody helping.
I
He
love how
loves to help
strong
people.
women raise warm men. I think that's also very common underlying here.
Yeah, he's very sensitive. He's very kind, extremely kind, and uh, not terribly driven. Um, and and then I'm like very, very driven. I'm, I don't know. It's like I'm the man, he's the woman in a way.
No, but also I think that's also, I also find a similar theme in the sense of, like, for someone like me, I'm also a very, very driven person. Um, but that also, and I think, I don't know if that worked for you or not. Um, Sometimes I think it's also because when I knew, if I needed, growing up in a patriarchal setup and being owned by males of the family, I knew if I needed my own ticket to freedom, I had to I had to learn that ownership. And for me, that first ticket was financial freedom. So I first had to take that on me and figure that out, that that was one of the biggest string to anybody's authority over my life. One. And in traditional setups where a woman is being passed off as a responsibility, first it's a father's responsibility, then she's a husband's
Yeah, her
responsibility.
husband's right.
Yeah. And then I figured, like, for me, that became like, when I grew up watching that and I saw how women were treated and I saw how men differently were treated, and I knew that I had to be, so nobody's going to tell me that I have to make my own money. Nobody ever told me. Nobody ever is going to tell me that I can take my own decisions. So I knew that I had to drive myself to change my reality. Like you just said, that if I want to be independent, I have to be willing to drive myself, to motivate myself, to figure things out for myself, to not rely on people. So I think that also becomes an underlying layer where when you do not rely on people because you're afraid of them driving you so much that you lose your own authority, that you become so self-driven and focused that you have to figure things out on your own, and then you become this person who can you know like yourself. Do you think that happened to you?
A little bit. I think that in the financial department, both John and I were independent, and we both were able to make a living without each other, let's say. So that was off the table, which gave us the freedom to really, it was more about identity, because in our social circles, I was one of the only females that was like driven, business minded, talking about ideas and dreams. And all my girlfriends were talking about what they watched in TV or other people. And they, were stay-at-home moms. They went to the moms groups. They and John and I raised our kids. Yeah, and John and I just raised the kids together, and we took turns in working. So, he would paint, I would watch the kids. Then I would paint, he would watch the kids. And we basically kind of did it together, and we didn't fit into these the traditional roles. And so people thought we were a little bit weird. And then there was a time where I thought something's wrong. This isn't normal. This isn't right. And really, the where we've arrived with it after all these years of marriage and building a business together is he does a lot, and he plays his part, and there's nobody else like him. And he has sort of been more in the supportive role, and I've sort of have taken the lead, but that's okay. And I don't know that I would be able to do what I do if he wasn't supporting, if he didn't do his part. So we work well together, and he doesn't have an ego about it. He doesn't feel like less of a man, or I don't know. I don't think he worries about things like that.
I'm sure that must have been a great example for your children and your
Well, I
son.
was going to say some of the conversations that we would have is I would tell my daughters, look, there's sort of two types you can choose. Choose a man based on what you want, not what you need. The relationship has to be based on wants, not needs. Like, desire each other, not need each other. And so that was number one. Then number two is, you can choose. They already knew they wanted to do something. They wanted to be artists. They wanted to build businesses. They wanted to do things, and they were driven for it. But do they want to marry somebody that's in that more supportive role, or do they want to marry somebody who really wants to go for it as well? And they've done different. Each one's sort of chosen. I have two that chose a driven person, and one that's chosen a more supportive and helpful person that's similar to John. And and so then I said that if you're both driven, it's a little bit more difficult, because you have to learn to work together. You have to be a power couple, and you have to equally care for their aspirations as much as your aspirations. And when it's time to support, you have to support. And see, because John never ran ahead and said, I want to do this, and and I need you to support me. I never really had to play that role much, even though if he ever did do that, I would be for it. I mean, he paints, and he does what he does, but it's not like a very time demanding,
Yeah,
resource
I can
demanding.
understand that.
We Yeah, it's like
I
we're
think me and my
building.
partner have that dynamic where, like you say, it becomes so much more harder because when two very driven people, uh, the room uh, the room for compromise is so tight, and it feels like a mountain that you're moving on your shoulder, I think.
Yeah, it's a power couple thing, and you have to. There is a way, and for those people who find that way, they're unstoppable. But and there's a way where you can support each other and be driven at the same time. But like you said, I think you have to compromise, and you have to, you both have to be really hardworking.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and
so
I love that. I think the advice that, and I also see this women around me where I see a lot of women complain about having that freedom and then having that liberties and, a lot financial, all of that. And I keep saying them that, there are always two sides of the coin. For people, let's say I can say for myself, for people like me who've literally built themselves from the ground up, I had to leave a lot of things behind, even like my father's support, their stability, and I had to really like work my through from literal ground. And even though I have all of this now, and I really am very, 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 because I've really worked hard, grateful for it, I have also given up a lot of things that traditionally people would have when you have someone looking after you. So it's like you can't always have best of both the worlds. Like, tomorrow, today, if you are the one leading or even leading your own life, you do, or very independent, that you don't have a fallback. Like, if you fall, it is you who needs to pick you up, and who, or and that fallback can be in any ways, financial, emotional, any ways. And sometimes, if you have, I think we all need to self investigate, how much are we willing to take on our shoulders, how much can we, like, how much can we take, and how much are we willing to compromise on that peace of mind, and um how much. And I think you've raised 4 children, but it's not always as easy, and I'm sure your journey with raising children wouldn't have been similar and traditional like other couples.
Yeah, it was different. Because John's been very involved in their life, and so I think they're really fortunate to have a dad around them all the time. And um, he still was, sort of the fun-loving, entertaining, and I was the serious, like, okay, we need to do it like the, good cop, bad cop. And I would always tell him, I'm tired of being the bad guy.
What about your
I want to be
feminine
the fun
energy? I
one.
really want to ask this because this is my personal question to you. What do you do as a woman? Because I think I also carry this masculine energy a lot. And even though we get things done, there's also very natural, and I'm going to take your advice on this because you're way ahead of me in this curve. Um, like the feminine side, when this feminine urge where you feel like, okay, for once you want to sit back and, you know being pampered, looked after, or taking a break, in the sense of, like, this this fun, feminine, soft energy, and sometimes you have to choose to be a certain way to reach the point you want, and to give up that side. Did you experience that?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest. I would say I'm weak in that area. I don't know. I don't know that I have that all figured out. I um, the little things that I do is I try to, like, I'll tell John often, I don't want to make decisions. Like, I just don't want to make decisions. Like, you decide. I'll do what you want. And and then, because he's not normally in that role, he second guesses his decisions.
Yeah. And then you're also not an easy one for someone who also has a habit of having things their way. You would not comply by unless you feel that your thoughts match with that. It's not even like, when you have a habit of leading, it also brings a lot of, like, those kind of things in between.
Yeah, but I definitely, I do have a feminine side to me, that where I express it is, I love to cook. I love to cook for John. He really appreciates when I do cook for him. He loves it, and he gives me lots of compliments about it. And so that's something we both enjoy. And I do like to be pampered and princessy, and go get massages and things like that. So I definitely do that. And then I think also, when it comes to mentoring and mentoring other women, I feel motherly.
Yeah, I
I
was about
feel
to ask that.
I feel feminine in that role, because I feel like there is a lot of nurturing and support, and believing in them, and uh, helping them see the truth about themselves, and speaking wisdom. I think wisdom is very, very feminine, and very, a female characteristic. So, and intuition, and I'm very intuitive, and so I I do feel like I have a strong feminine side to me, but it's maybe not in the normal ways that we think of it, like submissive, and so, and John has a very strong masculine side to him, in that, he he will do all the yucky things that nobody wants to do, and like, if there's a spider to kill, or a dog pooped when they weren't supposed to, I'm like, ew. And oh, I got it. He loves to, grill and take care of the cars, and you know go out and do all those man things. and he definitely like takes care of me in all those things, and I don't have to do any of that. So I don't know. I think you just find your way, and yeah, the balance. But I feel like I've had to be okay with my identity as this, different from what is expected. I think a lot of us are that way, though. Almost everybody doesn't fall into the template.
Yeah,
Um,
not anymore. Yeah.
yeah, and so I don't think that I'm that strange. It's just a matter of when you've grown up with that, of thinking for yourself, and being self assured, and going.
Yeah, I think it's also the narrative. Like, um, I think till a certain age, we are only exposed to the ideas that are immediate to us in the sense of our family, our parents' beliefs, their rules. And then I think once you grow up and you see relationships and roles beyond that, and that is quite a bit of time. Like, once you start going to not even school, I think we're all still very limited because it's still, but I think for me, I think I saw a very different side of relationships as spousal relationships and family relationships once I started to get into college and meet people just beyond my schoolmates and classmates, and it was like meeting them on an intimate level and understanding, okay, that's also how roles are like. So growing up in a patriarchal country, like my brother and I, we grew up in the same age, we were together, but I, even though my parents were not very in the sense of very liberating and didn't push us in any of those directions, but a lot of things are very subconsciously built into us. So my brother wouldn't even lift a finger, and I would help my mother just in general chores, not even making food or any of that, but just being around, serving, and things like that. And so I never saw that a man actually does something for us himself. And when I grew up and I moved out, and I saw like, yeah, men do. Families who do not have women, there are men raised to do the jobs that they do. So I think it's also a matter of time, then and then your horizon expands and you understand, okay, you know there is one world that I know, but there's so many different worlds out there, and we can choose whatever we want to be.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, now let's also go into the. I can't believe we've already spoken for 47 minutes, and it's become like a life lesson class for me. And I'm sure everybody who's listening to this episode is enjoying. But I also want to get to a lot of other parts. So 20, you've been working for 24 years. 24 years of an artist is a great. I mean, wow. Um, and you have a partner who's also an artist. Um, then you both of you. When did you start Milan Art Institute?
That was in 2010.
How long had you been working as an artist before that?
Since 1996, so that would have
Wow.
been 14 years.
Yeah. And let's say, what was your biggest driving force to a I have two questions. I get the context that you had, like you had the business side, and once you're working 14 years as a living artist, like as professional artist, you understand that the idea of being sold as an artist, that you sit in one room and paint and that is it, you that myth is well broken, and you found the reality. But taking being I think the role of independent artist as an entrepreneur is one game, but then also turning it into a like a whole independent company project in itself and taking a more entrepreneurial role. Did you have any fears in the sense of a, will it compromise your own creativity in the sense of your time, creative personal time, shifting roles, for navigating this whole process? Can you shed a little bit light on that?
Yeah, well, I think something we haven't talked about that is a huge part of my life is just vision. And so uh, when I was 19, I had a vision for my life. I had a moment in time where this sort of what I was going to do with my life was downloaded to me, and I saw this art movement, and I saw this worldwide art renaissance, and I was building something within that movement. And I saw artists from all over the world that were gathering on this land, and there was this community, and there was, you know, this big marketing section on that land. And you know, I kind of believe there's an aspect of this that's super literal, and I also think it's sort of digital.
I think it's also a mindset. Once you've figured, like, you start thinking marketing in the sense of just making your work more reachable. I think we figure our ways out when it's digital, and then, but I think the mindset shift and the vision that you, once you get learn that, I think digital, phygital,
Well,
offline.
it felt supernatural to me.
Yeah.
It felt like um, heaven just opened a scroll and showed me what my life would be. and
Wow.
and so it was extremely life changing. And so I had this, and you know, I'm 19. You don't have a problem with you know, the world is yours at that age, right? And so I had this idea that this is where I'm going, this is what everything is building towards. So then that kind of got rekindled in 2010 when I opened the school, and I connected that piece of this is how it will happen is through a school. And so and all these people I have to teach a lot of people how to turn their passion for art into a profession so that they can paint full time and not have to do these other jobs. So so when I opened the school, I was driven very much by that vision. And so my personal art time, well, I'm also like a workaholic. Like I love to work. And my yeah, my motto in life is do work that's no longer work, so you never have to work again. So to me, painting isn't work, and building the school and building the business, going to meetings, doing it isn't work.
But it's
I love
also,
it.
but also you have your family in it. It also
Yeah,
is
you
like
don't feel like
one
you're
way.
separate.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like it's meant to be that way. I think it's meant to be that way. Most that's how it used to be, you know, is this family would build something together, and there would be legacy. Yeah. But so yeah, I never felt like it always enhanced it. And the more that I taught, the better my skills became.
But then how do you still manage your own, because, running mm, a project, but I'm sure you have your family in it, so it also helps you take load off and distribute work, and, like, all of that. But also it's always a challenge to keep focusing on yourself, and then also building something new. I think the biggest challenge is the time it takes to build something new and nurture it and put it and invest into it.
Yeah. Well, I think purpose has like a cadence to it, and there's cycles and seasons that you do things. And so if I look back and I follow this cadence, I can see that there's years, maybe it's 2 3 years grouped together where the focus was more on the business, and then I'll see 2 3 years where the focus shifted a little bit, and I put a little more time into myself. And so the cadence now is you know, I spend a lot of time creating content for the business, but in terms of like the day in and day out management of it, I'm not doing anymore. And so I'm able to shift focus, and my partners in the business also see that the more successful I get as an artist, and the more successful my daughter gets as an artist, then the more strong that the business will be. So, and the school will be, and our social media and all those things. So so I consciously devote uh, you know, time to developing myself. So so I think it's always been different year to year.
So, okay, how has you and your partner evolved into this role of entrepreneurship and running the school?
How have we evolved into that? Well, when I first opened the school, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I just started teaching art classes. I did it all wrong. I made a ton of mistakes. Um, uh, and there was a lot, like I told you, I'm not that great at administrative things or organization, but I had one daughter, Daphne, my second oldest. She's very good at organization, and she just has this structured mind. And so I hired her for $50 a week to help me with maintaining the studio. So her job was to set up the classes and then clean up afterwards. And I could never find scissors, in these classes, and we'd need scissors for things to open something or whatever. And I was like, running all over the place trying to find scissors. And I kept buying all these scissors, but then I would lose them. And one day Daphne goes, why don't you get a bin and put tape across the drawer and write scissors, and then always put your scissors in that drawer? Then you always know where they are. And I'm like, Daphne, you're a genius. Oh my gosh, that is the answer. That's right. And so she started really helping me get organized, and it took time. From 2010 until 2014. I was just teaching, let's say, hobby classes. I wasn't teaching people how to have an actual career as an artist. And then finally in 2014, I developed the mastery program and built out that curriculum, and created a year-long course. And so it took me 4 years of learning before I got to that point. And so then once the mastery program was developed, then I just personally taught about 25 students each year. That was all I could manage single-handedly.
Did you have anyone involved in person with you from your family at this point, helping you run this?
Yeah, the last 2 years, so in 2016 and 17, Dimitra started helping me teaching. And John would help a lot behind the scenes, but not, he would come in and teach a class here and there, but mostly he was all the things you don't see. He was doing those things, and so yeah, it was just Dimitra and I. And then when it went online, I took on a partner who's now my third daughter's husband, and he helped me. He was experienced in online education and filming and producing a product for online education. So he we developed a partnership. He became, a part owner, and he helped me get it online, and then it started to scale.
Yeah, and I'm sure it grew drastically. You have students from India now, so I'm sure that's an um, answer to that question. So, what is this? What is this program? Why did you make it? Why it matters so much to you?
Well, it's basically my whole everything I've learned as a professional artist condensed into a 1 year program. And I realized that you do have to know how to draw, and you do have to know some classical skills. But most of what they teach you in art school is not that usable. And so it's this very distilled version of learning how to draw and paint. The other thing I learned is that um, there's this arbitrary 4 year program that is worldwide. Every degree is 4 years. Yeah, and then you can build onto that degree after that. And there's no reason for that. So once I started to think outside the box and like, well, what if somebody could actually learn to draw and paint realistically in 14 weeks? What would that look like? And so I created, if you knew nothing, if you didn't know how to draw anything, you've never touched paint before in your life, how would I teach them? And so I developed these lessons that step by step teach you everything you need to know to paint realistically in 14 weeks, and devoting 20 hours a week to learning. And you paint, I think, like 40 or 50 paintings in that time, and you learn a lot of skill, and everybody does it. and it's proven itself. And we see people that have never touched paint before, and in 14 weeks they can paint realistically really, really well in oil. And then we teach acrylic after, because if you learn acrylic after you've learned oil, then you're going to use acrylic properly and as a fine art medium. So then we teach mixed media and how to express yourself. So first the foundations, so that you aren't limited in how you express yourself. You have vocabulary to express yourself with. And then we teach how that journey of how to find your voice, how to identify your personal aesthetic. What is your message? What's at the core of your being that's going to come out on the canvas? And we have a whole process for that, step by step. It's like a self-discovery, step by step. And meanwhile, you're using all these different materials and processes and learning what your temperament is, because there's maybe 12 different temperaments, 4 basic ones, and everybody approaches art materials differently. If you are like me and you're somebody that's, very direct and immediate and you want things fast paced, there's certain materials that are conducive to that. And then there's other materials that are conducive to somebody that likes to take their time. They're very gentle and soft about how they approach things, and everything's subtle. Well, there's other materials that work better for that. So we really help people create their own process for painting that fits their temperament. So they're not painting in somebody else's voice, because a lot of artists, they paint what they admire, but what you admire is your opposite. It's always your opposite. And usually our favorite art isn't our art, it's somebody else's art. So you have to learn to resist wanting to paint like your favorite art and paint what's truly inside of you, because then you'll look forward to going to the studio. You'll love your process. There won't be this resistance of, I just don't feel like painting. You always feel like painting. And then we teach like professional habits, how to actually build a business, mindsets, not overcoming limiting beliefs, all those things. And that's when we see the students transition into really being a professional. And then we teach them how to build out a portfolio of 25 paintings that represent their voice, their style. That's a cohesive body of work. And then we teach them how to build a personal brand, which follows after they've discovered their voice, because their voice is a huge part of what they build their brand with. And then we teach them all the different marketing collateral to create that supports and expresses that brand, how to build a website step by step, how to build up their social media, all those things. And then in the promotion section, we teach them how to promote and actually sell their artwork, both the traditional route through galleries and dealers and publishers and those things, but also out on their own as self-representing, or it could be a mix of both. And then one of my favorite lessons is the last lesson in the mastery program, and it's how to build a one-year strategy for your first year in business. So everybody leaves the mastery program creating a one-year plan. And so if you just simply follow your one-year plan and you do the work, you'll be successful as an artist. And so if anybody ever graduates and says, "Oh, I just thought I'd be further along," I'm like, "Well, did you follow your one-year plan? Did you really follow it?" And so you always have the roadmap, you always have the way. It's just up to the individual if they're going to do the work. And so I believe in my core, what drives this, that was your original question, is that I believe anybody can be a professional artist. Anybody. It doesn't take talent. It doesn't take. It just takes passion, drive, and hard work. And so we created a program that if you want to be a professional artist and you follow it and you do the work, you will be, and you'll earn a living. So, and we've seen it so many times. There's countless success stories.
How many students have you taught so far?
There's probably about 5,000 students that have gone through the program.
This is amazing, amazing.
It could be more, but it's probably close to about that.
But from all parts of the world, and you've equipped people, and you've also, I think, one wonderful outcome is this, that you're gifting world more strong, sustainable artists, like, artists who are happy and can make a life out of them, and making more art in the world.
Yeah.
I love that. My God, Ellie, it was such a pleasure to speak to you. It's been so amazing, and I could go on, and I'm sure we need to do a few more parts for this. But anything final? What do you think is your final advice for someone who's, let's say, a lot of our listeners are artists themselves? So a lot of people who listen are somehow, some way, have already started that process. Probably, I think one of the most common struggles for artists is to get better at selling, to build more sustainable careers, to have more sustainable incomes. And I think that is where most artists get stuck. What is your advice for them?
Well, my first advice is to just make the decision one time. Make the decision once that you're going to live your best life and you're going to follow your dreams and pursue your passions at whatever cost. You're just going to do it. And don't waffle in that decision. It's a decision you make one time. And so, whatever it takes, however long it takes, um, you got to have perseverance and just fight for it, and it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And that's going to be your very best life. Then the second thing is, things change all the time, and what I want to say for women of India is that um, I can just see, maybe it's intuition, maybe it's a gut feeling, maybe it's just knowing and listening to Indian women. Your country is on the very edge of a renaissance. It really is, and there's a whole new day coming to India, financially, politically, commerce wise. I mean, everybody wants to invest in India. It is going to be a tremendous future, and things are changing all the time, and there's new technology, and there's a shift of wealth that's coming. And I would say artists need to be in position and learn and paint. You have to paint all the time. You have to spend time behind the paintbrush and really, really build your body of work and be a dedicated, committed artist, because um, there will be tremendous opportunity. And I think artists are positioned to be some of the wealthiest, affluent influencers of this age, and particularly in India. And I had plans right before COVID to come to India. I was going to do like, yeah, I was going to spend a whole week there doing workshops and meeting with people. And the trip got canceled because it was planned in the winter time, but then in spring is when COVID came, and so everything shut down. And I really want to, yeah, I really want to follow through with that decision. And so I don't know when, but I really want to go to India, because I believe in, I believe in, I mean, I believe in all the countries, but I know there's something very special happening in India.
I love that. Thank you so much. This is very, very kind of you. And if you are, and whenever you are, you have to let me know, and I'm sure we'll do uh, something more, something better. And I think it's been such a wonderful conversation. And what is your, apart from India? So we have a lot of listeners who are from all parts of the world, and a lot of them actually are in the US. What is your advice for them, if you have anything specific that you want to tell them?
I mean, I think it's just the same, and it's the same no matter where you are. Things are changing quickly, and embrace the change. Don't resist it. You know, look and read about what's happening. You know, what is blockchain? How does all this stuff work? What are these new tools that we can use? Don't just find a tool that you know how to use and live in that one tool forever. Today it's podcasts, but that might shift. It's going to evolve and shift into something else, and it always changes. So we live in a time of tremendous opportunity, and people who are sort of on the edge with their eyes open, looking, reading, are going to go the farthest. So yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much, Ellie. Before I let you go, how can people who are listening to you follow you, support you, find you, and if you want anything else for them to know, please let us know.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I have my personal account, so it's Ellie Milan. You can find that on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. My website elliemilan.com. I have a blog called Artist Odyssey on my website that every week I write something inspirational in that blog, so they can follow that. And then our school is Milan Art Institute. We have lots of different websites. The hub of all of it is milanart.com. And we have our own social media called Art Social. So there's an app you can download the app and get on Art Social. There's over 60,000 users right now, and it's growing. It's growing every single month, and there's new features, and it's a social media that's created specifically for fine artists. And so it's a great place to connect with people all around the world, get feedback on your work. There's free workshops on there just about every week where you can learn from us completely for free. And yeah, it's a fantastic. Um, I believe, especially in all the things we have planned, will absolutely revolutionize the art world. So I'm really excited about where we're heading, and I think Art Social is you from there you can find anything. So
Perfect. I will link for everyone who's interested. I will link all the links that and all the places that Ellie has mentioned. So make sure you go to our website. You head on to the show notes of this episode. We'll add a lot of work from Ellie's own personal work and all the projects, amazing things that she's doing for all of us. And yes, thank you for everyone who's joined us. And I hope you truly enjoyed this episode. And thank you so much, Ellie, for your 100% honesty. I truly, truly appreciate it. It's been so wonderful to chat with you. Thank you so much.
well, thank you for the opportunity, and yeah, thank you for posting the links. That's great. Bye.